Hey everyone, today we are talking about INTJ productivity tips. We so often still are working from outdated ideas around how to truly measure productivity and what it actually means. And so I'm really excited today, not just to talk to you about my favorite ways to manage your productivity as an INTJ, but to also really challenge maybe some of those legacy assumptions that we still make that are still very prevalent in this extroverted kind of hustle culture that seep their way into our work lives. So let's get into it. Hi, my name is Caroline from Caroline Adams Coaching, and today I'm going to share my 5 favorite INTJ productivity tips. There is an accompanying blog post. I will link it below. It has a lot more examples, visuals, prompts, if you want to go deeper into any of these. My first INTJ productivity tip is make sure that your to-do list actually connects to your bigger career goals. Sounds simple, right? But this is really where we get ourselves into trouble because so much clutter actually ends up on our to-do list. And I actually don't manage so much from a to-do list anymore. We'll talk about some of the ways I do that as I share the rest of the tips. When I do, one thing that I found to be really, really helpful if I really need to keep a list is to manage by the week instead of by an individual day. And in the process, I find that a lot of clutter that might make it on my daily to-do list kind of drops out. The most important thing is that what you're doing or what's on that list, what is guiding you in your day-to-day actions connects to those bigger goals. And if it doesn't, drop it, because this is where we start to operate from this outmoded way of looking at productivity. I'm a list maker, so I understand the satisfaction of crossing that stuff off our to-do list. But if that stuff we're crossing off isn't actually moving us forward, then who cares? And so rather than measure productivity in terms of, I got so much stuff done today, I put in 10 solid hours, I crossed 18 things off my list, I invite you to ask a different question, which I found to be really, really helpful. How can I get the best possible outcome with the least amount of work? I already hear the objections, but Caroline, I don't have control over my schedule, or Caroline, the expectation of my work is that we work 10 hours a day. I don't have time to implement these productivity tips. I'm too busy. I'm gonna address those a little bit later, but what I will say first off is remember, this is about productivity, and your productivity, your being able to function at your best is gonna help everyone around you. And so just keep that in mind. Productivity tip number 2. Identify your 1 to 3 most important things. Now, I made this number up, but again, as we talk about kind of moving away from that to-do list, just imagine you being so focused on your biggest goals, your highest impact activities, that you don't even need to keep a to-do list, or it's truly kind of just, stuff that you have to do, but is, really kind of not gonna take that much time or energy to complete. And so every day you're waking up and you already know your 1 to 3 things that you are going to be super, super focused on. It's part of what gets us in this true productivity habit rather than a to-do list, which all of the time stuff is crowding in that isn't as important or urgent as it might seem. In addition to my 1 to 3 things, which are, the things I do to keep the lights on, the business running, the clients happy, I allow myself one project at a time. What this does is, if you're like me as an INTJ, I can get really overwhelmed with ideas, right? I'm thinking of new ideas and things that I get really excited about right away. And because we're INTJs and we are looking to execute and actually build those out, I found that it could be really easy to start at, I'd look around and it'd be like spinning 5 plates all at once. And so having this mantra and having this goal of, okay, here are my 1 to 3 things that I do every day automatically, here's my one project, I don't get distracted with those other ideas and projects. They still live somewhere, they stay on a list, they stay in a notebook, somewhere where I can pick them up when it's time, but they don't distract me from the most important things that I've said that I'm going to do. And we'll talk a little bit later when we get to tip 5 around why it is actually so detrimental to be spinning all of those different plates, so stay tuned for more on that. So let's roll into our 3rd INTJ productivity tip, and maybe our most controversial, which is condense your workday. All right, so this is my favorite tip because it operates from this principle of, how the task that you're working on will take as long as the time you give yourself to complete it? So that report is either going to take you a full week to complete, or if you give yourself a real deadline, you could totally knock that thing out in an hour or two, at the same level of quality or a good enough level of quality. And so this is how I've started to manage my time. So if we say I'm going to work 4 to 6 hours a day, and that's going to be my official work day, then it forces us again to really drop that stuff that is going to distract us, that's going to be low value, that's going to be low impact, and laser focus us on spending that 4 to 6 hours or whatever your condensed window is on the most important things. All right, let's move on to our fourth INTJ productivity tip, which you know this well. It is essential for INTJs to carve out dedicated, uninterrupted thinking and doing time. And this is so important for us, and yet we don't often get to do it, especially if we work in an environment where it's kind of constant reacting to requests, constant meetings, constant kind of extroverted putting energy out there. And so I encourage you, and we'll talk about some techniques in just a moment, I encourage you to block out that thinking time. Block it out. Tell people you're out of the office. Communicate to whoever you need to. Set whatever boundaries you need to, but protect that time as if it's the most important thing, because it is the most important thing. Your being at your best, most strategic, focused, big picture self benefits everyone around you. Hopefully you're hearing this theme of how your productivity actually benefits everyone else. All right, so now let's move into our fifth and final INTJ productivity tip. That is limiting context switching. Context switching is the concept that shatters once and for all this untrue idea that we can actually effectively multitask. So back when I was talking about spinning all those plates, right, having 5 projects going at a time and jumping in between them, you might think that you can do that really well. I used to think so. I used to spend a lot of time doing that. Let me explain to you what happens. As soon as you're just working on 2 things and splitting your attention between 2 things, you lose 20% of your productivity because your brain has to take that time to shift. When you move it to even just 3 things, you lose 40% of your productivity time. Check out the blog post. I share a lot more resources and information as to why this is, but this is proven. This is what happens. And so as efficient and productive as we might feel when we end our day, having touched 3 different things, it's actually super unproductive and ineffective. And again, it's draining our energy. So let's talk about 3 of my favorite ways to limit context switching. The first one you've probably heard of, it's called calendar blocking or task batching. Another beautiful way to move away from the to-do list is just have stuff either automated or just on your calendar. And so calendar blocking is when you set aside blocks of time, and it's actually baked into your schedule to focus on one of those 1 to 3 things, right? And so for me, coaching, on my coaching days, I am coaching. I'm not in between coaching calls, writing a blog post or, looking at my financials. I am focused 100% on that. So, do what you need to do to kind of set up the calendar blocks that work for you. But I really encourage you to, number one, calendarize this stuff and give yourself real time to focus on the things rather than switching through them. The second thing, this is beautiful. I learned this one too late. And this is the idea to limit context switching by building in transitions. As you're moving from one activity to the next, just acknowledge it and kind of make that intentional transition in your brain. And so, as most of you, I spent a lot of time in corporate on these back-to-back meetings, right? Where I was literally running from one big picture topic to then a really detailed topic. We lose so much productivity when we're switching. And so even something as simple, I want to challenge you, if it's an hour meeting, leave 15 minutes early and use that time to tie up whatever you need to do to signal to your brain, all right, we're moving on from that topic and now we're moving into the new topic. And if you're like, Carolyn, I can't possibly leave 15 minutes early, if that's feeling like too big a stretch, fine. All you need is 1 minute. At 11:59, as you close out that 11 o'clock call and prepare for your 12 o'clock call, you can just sit there, close your eyes if you need to, focus on your breath, and just remind yourself and set your intention about letting go of whatever was discussed in that last meeting and focusing your attention on the next meeting. My third and probably favorite context switching tip, signal the end to your workday. And I had a client, the way she would do this, she would power down her laptop, she'd put that laptop in her closet, in her laptop bag, and she'd put up several barriers that she had to walk through to open up that laptop. And if you're like me, it's not enough for me to kind of turn off my brain at the end of the day. And so I physically take myself out of the apartment. I go for a walk. And if you're also like me, again, we're INTJs, so we're always in our head. In the beginning, I would spend that entire walk in my head thinking. And I would get home at the end of the walk and either, would just not really be that relaxed because I spent it working, or even worse, come home, fire back up the laptop, and start working on the things I was thinking about. And so what I found really, really helpful and actually kind of a beautiful ritual to truly celebrate the end of the workday is get myself out of my head by focusing my attention on the five senses, like to really observe what's going on the street around me as I take my walk. What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I feel as I'm walking down the street? And this has been just, like I said, an absolute beautiful, game-changing ritual to kind of ease that transition. Before we close out the video, I just want to circle back to this idea. If you are a person that found yourself listening to these things and saying, must be nice, Caroline, but I don't have control over my schedule, right? Or I don't have the time, or the expectations at my office are that I'm supposed to be working 10 hours a day. And so if you find yourself getting into that, it's understandable. I do understand. But I invite you to start with those limiting beliefs because those things are affecting a lot more than your productivity. By setting some of these boundaries, by working in a much different way than a lot of people are actually working, let's face it, you actually have the opportunity to not only make a better and bigger impact, but to even challenge other people's decidedly unproductive way of working. Have a think about that. Leave your questions and your comments below, and I will talk to you soon.